just want to highlight, we did have our 2022 Food Safety Excellence Award winners, and so they were at our meeting. We had a great presentation. The awards were given out, and so again, it was very exciting to recognize our food establishments that go above and beyond. Our community health improvement plan has been also approved by our board, as well as the 2 hospital systems in the neighboring counties, so that will continue being allowing us to be a certified health department. And then what I did pass out to each of you is by state statute, local health departments are required 90 days after the close of their fiscal year to issue an annual report. So we have our 2022 annual report. These are for you to take and be able to share, but a couple of highlights this year I just want to acknowledge is one, the front cover. We decided that she might not look like this anymore for a while, so she deserves to be a cover girl one last time, so to speak. And then on the second page, it's a one-pager if you were actually to print it out separately, but it's our 2022 highlights that just kind of gives a quick summary about all the work we do in one snapshot. But that's just the overall board report, and then in terms of the packet, I'll defer to Scott to go over the dates.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions about the report or anything for Monica? Sure, Steve.
I have a question that may align with this report is for food carts and such. I think we talked about that, or I inquired a month or so ago about anything we can do to help incentivize those. I see the city on their agenda tonight. They have a item on the agenda to reduce fees. I don't know by how much to encourage food carts. I know the ROE has lacking the name of the program, our music program, but it's the Arts in the Park program. Thank you, Arts in the Park program. But my understanding is that there's also the food permits that we do. I just like have Monica maybe speak to that to see if there's any incentives, anything we can do collectively between all parties, the ROE, the city, the county, the health department, to encourage more people to come downtown, to enjoy downtown for the music, for food and such. So for your piece of it, if there are any comments?
So to first start off, to give a little bit of background, our environmental health program led by Director Carrie Peoria, they've been actually working with our food carts for actually 2.5 years now, because we just seen through COVID kind of the diminishing capacity of them, not only downtown, but in other events. A few years back, you might remember we did an ordinance change where we brought forward a multi-event temporary license, and this was actually to cut costs significantly for those vendors to do multiple events throughout our community. So that was actually one of our largest incentive programs. Based on our conversations with our food establishments, we do have a food safety work group that's made up of industry individuals, as well as on our Board of Health. We actually have a food establishment owner, Triple Dipples in Chillicothe, Mr. Harold Webster. The biggest issue is something that we can address, and that is they don't have enough staff for their brick and mortar to bring forward into their external events. So the way our licenses work is, because if they are especially established as a license in our county as a brick and mortar food establishment, they can extend that out and do events and not necessarily have to get additional licensing based on how their license structure is built. If they do they're just do temporary food events only, then they do a multi-use, and then they can do unlimited throughout the year. And it's less than half the cost of if they were to go and do a license for each singular event. Many of the places that have done food carts or temporary food permits around our area, as well as farmers markets, have done these type of licenses, and that's kind of the feedback they've been able to provide us. But when we do talk to them, the number one thing is they don't have staff to go and man two sites at the same time.
Thank you. I think Scott said he has some insight into what's going to be on the agenda tonight at the council.
Right. So Monica talked a little bit about the logistics of food trucks and food carts. Carts for us in the central business district here, those go on the public sidewalk. Trucks obviously are in in a parking lane on the street. And throughout the city of Peoria has designated specific areas for food trucks where a truck could park, in the public right of way. On our block, that is the Hamilton side of our block, which, as it relates to the Arts and Education Spring Celebration, is a logistical challenge because that's where all the buses park to make sure that the participants that are here have safe access to and from the property. So what we've done and what's on the agenda tonight as part of that item is a twofold thing. That is, one, to allow food trucks to be parked along the 100 block of Northeast Adams, which is our block of Adams, for 1 year, and for the fees to be waived. So we'll see what happens tonight. We actually would prefer if, instead of just making it for 1 year, if it were waived, or that the food trucks were allowed to park in that block every April and May during Arts and Education Celebration every year. So it may or may not get deferred tonight. We'll see what happens, but that's what's in front of the council this evening.
Great. Any questions on that? Okay, now we'll move on to the HHS timeline.
All right, Mr. Chairman, that should be in everyone's packet. You asked that we put together just a comprehensive list of key dates or important dates for this last portion of the project. Just to quickly run through those for, you have it all in your packets, but for those maybe that either are watching or will watch the live stream, some of those key dates are on March 7th, two things happened. One, we published the legal notice of bid in the Journal Star, and that was the last formal value engineering meeting that we had. And I know Member Ruling can talk to that a little bit more about that here in a moment. On St. Patrick's Day, the bid specification, the plans were made available to all suppliers and subcontractors in our plan rooms. On March 23rd, we had a pre-bid meeting that did include targeting or having a targeted effort for minority business enterprises, women-owned businesses. And we had good attendance from several different suppliers and subcontractors across all of the different construction divisions. March 24th, so the following day, was the first deadline for the initial round of questions that any of those prospective bidders might have. The 29th, which is tomorrow, that is the deadline for all questions from prospective bidders. And then next Monday, the 3rd, Farnsworth and River City will issue the final addendum. That final addendum will be available to everyone that has been in the plan rooms or shown some level of interest. They will receive every question and an answer to every question in that addendum. April 6th, all the sealed bids for all the construction divisions are due in County Finance. County Finance will then open those and record all the bids received. April 6th through the 11th, River City Construction will conduct the scope reviews, determine if the apparent low bidder has a complete bid, are qualified and capable of performing. That's critical in that once the bids are open, they'll take whoever the apparent low bid is for each one of the construction divisions, and then go through each one of those and determine if the apparent low bid is in fact the most qualified low bid. On April 11th, we will get the guaranteed maximum price for the project from River City. And then sometime between the 11th and the 13th, most likely, we're going to ask the committee chair for a special meeting of this committee. Ideally, the chair and I have talked. We do not want that to be at 5 o'clock on April 13th. And then ideally on the 13th, when the board meets, we'll be in a position to award or approve the guaranteed maximum price and any associated budget amendment that may or may not be needed. Until the bids are actually opened, we have no way of knowing where the actual price of the project is going to come in relationship to our pre-construction estimates and in relationship to what has already been appropriated. Just as a reminder, River City, as the construction manager at risk, which is the delivery model that a prior board approved, they actually hold all of those subcontractor and supplier contracts. So the board's action is going to be to approve that guaranteed maximum price and then any associated budget amendment that might or might not be needed. A couple other things to point out. Once the guaranteed maximum price is approved, the only way that the project budget can increase is by another vote of the county board. If the project goes over budget, then River City has to absorb that overage. If the project comes in under budget, then we avoid paying the full contract amount to River City. And then lastly, approval in April is critical so that River City's plan and goal is to have the new structure enclosed before winter. And if we're successful in doing that, then we will avoid premium costs associated with weatherizing the building for winter conditions. So those are the key dates and a couple of other key points, Mr. Chairman. I know Mr. Rowland would probably like to share his thoughts in terms of the value engineering that's been done to date, and I'd be happy to turn it back over to you and him, and then I can answer any questions afterwards.
Thank you. Yeah, I thought it was important for everybody to see these dates because I didn't want anybody to think that we were trying to push this through, but yet there is a sense of urgency that we have to commit to this because if we push it off to the next board meeting in May, we're losing a lot of critical time that we need to get the building enclosed by this winter. So I don't want anybody to think that we're trying to push it through. As you see, the bids are coming in. We have 3 days after they're opened and assessed before our board meeting. So if for some reason we don't think that's enough time, I'm willing to ask that we have a special board meeting the following week, but it would be a special board meeting of the whole board to get this through because there is a sense of urgency with this project. So I just wanted everybody to be aware that's where I'm coming from with that. I did ask Terry to come today to give a report. I know he's been doing a lot of work and a lot of input and has definitely proved his worth for us and advocating on our behalf to help see what areas that we might be able to capitalize on saving some money. So Terry, if you wouldn't mind giving us a little update on your perspective.
I appreciate that, Chairman. The value engineering process, while I came into that a little bit late, it had been done in several rounds prior to my attendance. But the process is with River City, with county representatives, myself, a number of people involved, and actually tweaking the drawings, making changes to those that are incorporated into the bids that we're going to be getting over the next several days. I want to make a comment. I think important that you all understand that Monica has been very involved, very cooperative, very practical. She's made efforts to save money where she can. She has made efforts to utilize equipment that's still in good shape from the existing building. And considering all the things she has to do, I think she's a pretty capable planner for what, there's just so many balls in the air, moving people from out of that building, storing equipment away, inventorying that stuff, and figuring out what's usable, what's not. I've been very impressed, and so as a new board member, thank you. Now, the value engineering changes that we talked about in the last 2 or 3 months that I've been involved took some structural elements out of the central spine of the building. There were some large columns in there, and the roof was supported independently of the rest of the building. Long story short, that amounted to a building inside of a building, so we took that out and we bore the weight of the roof of that central spine on the existing structure, which was a pretty minor effort, I would consider, from the architect's standpoint, but it has a potential of saving quite a bit of money. We may not ever identify that because those bids will come in with those value engineering items already included in them. So I'm not going to get into the detail. There's a list of 5 or 6 items that we identified that could be in the $200,000 to $300,000 range in terms of what we may save. Could be more than that when we see the bids. We also, as a group, identified 13 bid alternates. Now, these are things that are going to be bid the way the plan shows them, but with an alternate method of doing it. For instance, commercial glazing in the interior of the building. If we modify a certain amount of that from a commercial glazing system, storefront glass, so to speak, to a modular door system, which is probably more common in most people's vision of what the interior of a building like this looks like. There's 13 of those things. That particular item, the bidders will bid it according to the plan, and then they'll give us a deduction for what it saves to do it the other identified way. That particular one is about $120,000, so it's substantial. Those total, at least in a contractor's estimate, about $335,000. So we've got the potential here for $500,000 to $600,000 in the latest round of value engineering changes as well as bid alternates. And I know that River City asked these contractors who are bidding, if you find something you think could be done less expensive and could propose an alternative, we will consider those as well. So I think there is some potential and a lot of value to the taxpayer in the effort that we've been through here. One minor correction to something that Scott said. We have a guaranteed price going to be proposed to us, but there are a couple of things that you need to be aware of are not included in that number. We will be responsible for utility connections to the building. We will also be responsible for fixtures and furnishings and equipment. Those could add a substantial amount. They will add a substantial amount. Again, this is someplace where Monica has been very cooperative and very, I would say, frugal in trying to keep these costs down, the furniture and fixtures especially. So let's be careful when we hear these numbers that from the bid numbers by all these individual contractors, River City will add their management fee to run the project, and then we will have some individual costs as well. A lot of what I've just said becomes less important until the bids arrive, so value engineering will be built into it, but bid alternates, we won't necessarily be compelled to accept or deny a bid alternate until we know where the budget for the building is. So I'm going to keep this paperwork handy. I didn't print one for everyone, but I'll stick around after the meeting, and if you have specific questions, I'll do my best to answer those. But I can tell you, myself, Scott, Monica, and probably a few other people in this room could also contribute to those answers. If they're on that committee, everybody seemed very well aware and very engaged in the process. So I appreciate the opportunity that you guys gave me to put me in that group, and I think we made a difference.
Thank you, Terry. Definitely. Yeah, and I would like to add that, Monica, definitely, more about construction Then I thought you did.
And most likely we'll never have to use that skill set again, hopefully.
Yeah, and again, the three of them I think make a good team representing our interests. So, Sharon, do you have a question?
So the structural changes that you made, is that going to affect the potential solar that we are, okay.
Any other? Yeah, go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, I guess two questions. One is the furniture and fixtures piece of it. Is that a separate line item that's not part of the bid package that was put out? I just need to kind of understand, is it in the current bid package? Is it outside of it? And then the electrical hookup, same question.
I'm going to let Scott address that because we have a buying contract and we have a relationship with Widmer's. They've helped us with design and so forth. Scott can elaborate.
Great question, Mr. Ricker. So as Mr. Ruland stated, furniture and fixtures and finishes, FF&E are not included in the bid. We do have, using a cooperative purchasing agreement, we have several that we participate in. We're able to get deep discounts on any variety of office furniture manufacturers, but the deepest one is with Herman Miller. Obviously, Widmer Interiors is the local rep for Herman Miller, and we have Herman Miller throughout the entire organization in many of our facilities. So we work directly with that. So that will not be bid. It'll come directly from Widmer using our cooperative purchasing agreement capabilities and the discounts that we get through that cooperative purchasing agreement process that we use. And then you had a second part.
Yeah,
What was your second part?
A second part is, I guess two pieces of the second part is, what is our current approved budget? As you mentioned that we may have to have a budget amendment. So if you would help make sure all board members understand what is the current approved budget, that if it comes in under that, we don't need an amendment. And if we do an amendment, what are the pieces of the amendment we'd look at? And then I guess with this the furniture and fixtures finish, that would all be part of the overall capital price of this project, right? That's not a
Correct.
held off on a separate account. That all goes into the total cost of this facility. So if you could kind of answer the budget, where do we stand today, and what are where would we have to adjust and have a board approval? And I would assume that's a budgetary approval, right? Of meeting 66% or whatever that. Just
Right.
make sure we're all on the same page. Thanks.
Yep. So I'm pulling up our draft agenda briefing right now, which has most of this information in it.
Can I make one comment?
By all means, Monica, please do.
I will, while he's doing that, I want to make sure one thing is clear. When Farnsworth Group and River City have been presenting the different stages of the project and the kind of projected budgets at each of those, that did include the full capital cost, to your point, including the FF&E. So the numbers you were seeing that were presented throughout this process, we've been always operating as a complete budget would have that included in there. Yeah.
So the current amount that's been appropriated in either prior years and then brought forward, plus whatever's in the current year, you have $250,000 from solid waste management, we have $14 million from American Rescue Plan Act, and $1 million from excuse me, from the health department. So that would be 15.5. I've talked to many of you, and as we've talked, I think before in this committee and others, the health department has been intentionally practicing what the highway department does for major capital projects, and that is building up the reserves over a number of years, so that specifically for this project, and so those reserves also need to be appropriated as part of the action that the board will take. At this point in time, I think Monica and I are comfortable saying that could be 4.5 million, which would take us to, if my math is right, that should be just a shade under 19.5 million. If you recall from the original project budget, even though it's not appropriated yet, there was a second 250,000 from the solid waste management fund that would be at the end if it were needed. So that the total original project assumed $500,000 from recycling, assumes 14 million from ARPA, and assumes that initial 1 million from health, but gets a total of between 5 and 5.5 from the health department. A lot of it will depend on if we get the most recent PPRT distribution before that. The final pre-construction estimate, which included all hard and soft costs, was pegged at, let me look at my spreadsheet here, 21.8. So we're, about 300, a little less than 3 million of a gap. But I think as Mr. Ruland has stated in some of the last rounds of value engineering are not included in that number, so that number will come down. And then River City fully expects, based on what they are seeing in the industry, that we will experience a savings when the actual sealed bids are opened. And then several of those costs drive some of the soft costs, which are percentages of the hard construction cost and whatnot. So at this point, I would say that at worst case scenario, the gap is 2.8 million, but I think it'll be less than that when the bids are actually opened.
Just from my clarity, anything over we had the 14 million with ARPA, the $500,000 for sustainability, and the 1 million from health department already. So if we stay within that, then there's no budget amendment needed. Is that a correct statement?
I would say less 250,000 as the second half of that of the portion from solid waste management was going to be appropriated at the end. So there's only been originally 250,000 appropriated from solid waste management.
So 15,250,000 is what has been already approved by this board, and
Correct.
Anything above that would have to go through a budget amendment.
Correct.
I just trying to make sure I got right numbers in my head. Okay, thank you.
I did want to say, I know it was encouraging at the pre-bid meeting. There was a good showing of attendees there. So I think that's encouraging too, knowing that quite a few people will be bidding on this project. Yes, Brian?
I know we receive a lot of benefit from this cooperative agreement we have with Widmer's and whatever the name of the other, was it Miller you said? Or?
Herman Miller's the manufacturer, yes.
But is there any way we can find out, I mean, I should know, my wife would probably know better than I, but how many total dollars roughly within a couple 100,000 are we looking at for furnishings and light fixtures and things?
Right, so currently the FF&E budget, which is furnishers, fixtures, and equipment, and I'll say the morgue equipment is called out, is not part of this number. We've accounted for that separately. The current allowance that we're holding is 1.2 million, but that is from the most recent estimate, which again predates some additional work that Monica and her team did to say we can make do with some of our existing furniture, which means it's scaled back the amount of new furniture that we'll have to purchase.
Could I ask another question? When the final bids come back, my preference would be, I would like to have the total bid of the building and the construction, the management fee, the furnishings, and the electrical hookup, all included, because I want to know how much it's going to cost us all in. I don't want to keep coming back, in 2 or 3 months from now and saying, well, now we got to add this on.
I believe it will be an all-in cost.
Pardon me?
I think it'll be one done.
Okay. everything will be included, the management fee and everything? Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Yes, Steve.
Is there any value of bidding out the furniture fixtures? I mean, we have, I mean, I know my employer across the street, we have governmental programs too. We have multiple programs that we offer governmental bodies to buy product. Are there any values or benefits as a governmental body to make sure for our taxpayers we made the most conscious choice and the best selection of supplier?
I'm not sure you're going to find a competitive bid that has 40% or more discounts on office furniture, and an plus or comma and that if you wanted to go with a different manufacturer, let's say for example Steelcase, who's another major player, but is not part of a cooperative purchasing agreement that we participate in, we'd have to engage local Steelcase representative, have them mock up a complete design and then spec Steelcase furniture as an example, and then provide pricing for that, and that obviously slows down the project.
All right. I just have one quick question for Terry. Do you feel that any of the alternatives that are in the bid package or any of the value engineering has lessened the quality of the building and won't last as long, or do you feel that enough thought has been put into that? Because we ultimately want a new building, but we want a new building that's going to last. So just if you can
Actually, a lot of our conversations relative to bid alternates, I think, could end up being better choices, even though they're less expensive. We had, in the architect's original version, offices completely enclosed with glass on one wall. That makes for poor sound absorption. Acoustically, it's not a great situation. It limits privacy if there's a personnel interview going on in one of those rooms. So in some places, these smaller doors with a glass sidelight, like almost exactly like what we have entering into the boardroom here, that's a better choice and it's less expensive. I don't think there's anything that we did that anyone would say is detrimental to the construction of the building. We took out some things like the green wall. A living plant wall is a nice feature, but it doesn't necessarily add to the functionality. It's just a comfortable, nice look. Could be a higher maintenance item down the road. So I think we were practical but sensible not to cut back on durability, longevity, functionality. I would stand by that pretty well.
Thank you. I just think that's an important point that everybody to know, that while we did that, the team looked to make sure that we weren't making a less nice building. Okay, we're gonna move on. Oh, go ahead.
Just a quick question, without getting too deep in the weeds with the budget, but the $5.5 million, if I look at this sheet here, the $5.5 million is down here in the fund somewhere, is it not? I mean, that's where, when we're talking about these reserves and everything, it's
Correct. It's in the reserves.
in the
That's
back
correct,
page
Mr. Hare.
of this, it's already
Right.
in the 6.4 million that's on this report.
Right.
Yeah.
And correct. And so how we arrived at that number for the committee is we took the county board's stated financial policies for reserves. And this is a property tax supported fund, although more than 60% of the revenues in the health department fund, not the employee health fund, but the health department fund, comes from state and federal grants. Less than 25% actually comes from property taxes, but it is a property tax supported fund. Within the financial policies, this fund has a certain fund balance requirement that you've adopted. We took that number and we added to that what we felt was a worst case scenario cushion. And the worst case scenario was several years ago during the Rounder administration, where the state did not have a budget, and what was the fiscal impact on this fund during that situation, which is having no revenue streams coming in versus having reduced, as that might be caused by a recession that will come at some point, but we don't know when and we don't know to what degree. We added $500,000 to the fund balance policy and said that is more than an adequate comfort level and cushion to keep those in reserves for operating purposes. The Board of Health talked about that extensively and did pass a resolution of their own that said that that's where their comfort level is as the policymaking body. Even though you appropriate the tax levy, once that's done and they approve the budget, then it's their responsibility to go ahead and implement. And the Board of Health has said that's what their comfort level is, taking into account what your financial policies are. So, what we will recommend from to be pulled from those reserves will go no lower than what that stated policy or what that policy statement from the Board of Health is.
Excellent, thank you.
And like you said, the Board of Health voted on it last month, correct?
Yes, it's actually in your packet as well, the language that they went through. And I also just want to add the policy that the county board approved was a 16% reserve policy. If you look at the back of that document, it's based on our expenses that we budgeted for. We're been running higher than usual our expense budget because our grants specifically related to COVID response in the past few years has required us to budget 100% of our grants because they're reimbursement at 100% of expenses to assume 100% revenue. Historically, we sit around $6 million as our actual expense budget.
Thank you.
Okay, last question, Phil, and we got to move on.
All right, thank you, Rob. Terry, a few years ago when we did our master's facility plan, one of the things that we found was most everybody had problems with storage. Did you have to make any decisions in regards to limitation of storage space for some of these?
I think Monica might be able to be more specific, but after touring, I'll answer this my way, and then we'll let Monica answer it her way. After touring both the county's morgue facility as well as the health department facility, it seemed to me that, yeah, there was a problem there relative to storage, but in terms of the ability now, and the coroner's office is definitely moving in this direction to do a lot more with digital file storage. That's minimizing the need, and those conversations between Monica and the architects in terms of setting aside space for that, I think those were sound and fruitful, and I'm going to let you answer that the rest of the way, Monica.
No, I think that's exactly correct. We did have a lot of storage related to our paper, medical records, and so forth. But just in the exercise of us moving out of our facility, we started, I think, a year and a half ago, kind of auditing. We had over 600 banker boxes of files based on, and we do a robust inventory and record management. Moving out of the facility and putting into temporary storage, I think we put just under 300, with about half of those going to be aged out or be ready for destruction within the next 5 years. So we built storage appropriately for our material items. It's also important to note that part of the project that we did through value engineering is that we are keeping our garage as a site to also have some storage out in that facility as well as in the EMA. But we did maintain our storage capacity.
I will speak to that too. Our documentation system went purely digital on January 1, so we're absolutely storing no documents on site at all. They're all cloud stored. And historically, when we were doing death investigations for someone who died within the hospital setting, we were having those records sent via back and forth and big collections of stuff that would go into our permanent records. Over the last 3 years, we've actually had record access for both hospital systems here. So now it's an online view of the record, and we don't request anything hospital setting. So all of our police reports, EMS reports, all that stuff is uploaded to the cloud now, so we don't collect any paper.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on. We'll have an opportunity to discuss more of this at our special committee meeting before the next board meeting. Next is their care and treatment board. Nothing? Okay, thank you. Jason, you may.
Oops. Good afternoon. All right. So I'm happy in front of you. I think you've got my monthly report. I'm happy to report in this monthly report. You'll notice that there's only one line there for COVID-19. So I believe May 11th is a big day when we go back to normal. So that's a positive, and if you'll see that in the remaining part of the report with respect to like meeting attendance, and I think if you look at a number of those, I won't go through them, but you'll notice that there's severe weather preparedness, a lot of preparedness activities, specific kind of situational awareness type things. So training-wise, again, we did our annual weather spotter training with volunteer spotters, fire departments last week. I would like to publicly thank Caterpillar Incorporated. They host that at the Edwards Demonstration Facility, and they provide us a wonderful meal and a great place to do that. So we appreciate that collaboration with one of our community partners. We've held some, actually the cybersecurity or the critical infrastructure training is probably going to roll into. I'm having some discussions with city IT specific about initiating a certificate program that TEEX offers. And I think there's 5 additional courses that we're going to try to get scheduled regionally, so individuals, particularly critical infrastructure members. The natural gas training for first responders was something that came as a result of the fire chief reached out and asked if there was a way to do something like that. So we collaborated with Ameren, and I believe it was last week they provided 90 minutes, like 6 different times. And I know at least I was there one day for a little bit. City of Peoria Fire Department had a number of people, and there were public works, volunteer fire departments, emergency communications, a number of people taking advantage of that. So. And then the other thing on the training side is next week, I think looking around the room, I've seen some of your names on the training. We have a senior officials workshop hosted next week. I think it's next Wednesday, if I'm not mistaken. So looking forward to that. Exercise-wise, the only exercise we've actually conducted in that, the others have been meetings. So again, you'll see we're starting to get back into our cycle of training and exercising, really trying to identify what our capabilities are. Do we have gaps in response to certain things? We're really looking forward to the river exercise where our first responders, particularly the critical incident teams, SWAT teams, the dive teams, some tactical units will be using the river on an effort. And a good collaboration, we did a debris management tabletop a couple weeks ago. Public Works from the city, County Highway Department, Becca from Sustainability, GIS, and just identifying that when we have an incident that creates or generates a large amount of debris, how are we going to remove that debris? So you'll see in the news probably as I move down to outdoor warning sirens, we continue to maintain those. Some situational awareness. I'm sure everybody's aware of what happened in the southern part of the United States over Friday night, I believe. And we're starting to be getting situational awareness from National Weather Service Lincoln. Apparently, we could be in the target area of some potential severe weather on Friday. So we're looking at that. We discuss that always when we go into our outreach. Severe Weather Awareness Week was the first week in March, so we did some radio interviews and some things. Had some miscellaneous underneath there. Just I continue to be offered the opportunity, and we take it to participate in a number of different focus groups, particularly in hazard mitigation and some other activities that we're doing locally. And again, with respect to weather and collaborations, both sustainability has been a big partner here recently. We've had a lot of discussions, as well as GIS in developing some, as we move into severe weather season, identifying vulnerable sites, populations on our GIS maps so that when we have severe weather and we have weather spotters activated, we can, should we have an incident in a particular location, we might be able to look on a map and identify, hey, do we need to contact this mobile home park specifically because they're in a direct path of something, or this sporting Louisville Sluggers on there. If we've got an event on a weekend, do we need to call a Louisville Slugger and warn them that they may be in the path of some others? So that we're back to, I would like to say, doing emergency management work and no longer response work on a day-to-day level. Although we continue to push out PPE and assist with some COVID activities and some vaccines. We're happy to be back in the emergency management world. So, questions, comments for me?
Fantastic. Any questions? All right, thank you.
All right, thank you, Rob.
All right, next we have the Regional Office of Education. Welcome. Here the Regional Superintendent is off on vacation. Sunny.
Living her best life on a beach in Mexico.
Nice.
And so, George McKenna, I'm the Assistant Regional Superintendent, happy to represent our office. You obviously have in writing, this might be the first time we actually gave you something ahead of time. And so I'm not going to read off everything, but what I would like to thank is the county board members who came out to our, the Peoria Regional Learning Center as we had an open house because we switched locations from Wildlife Prairie Park to the Franciscan Recreational Complex after a relatively extensive, if you saw the building before, the downstairs before, and you saw it after, there was an extensive renovation to turn it into classroom areas, and it's absolutely phenomenal. Kids love it. It really turns around our services, in particular for kids in the city who didn't potentially have transportation out to Wildlife Prairie Park. So we're excited about that. Our area in Peoria County, very lucky that we've been on the forefront of a lot of school safety related issues, so much so that we think we're going to be the beneficiary of a Homeland Security grant where we'll be the central hub for Illinois if we're not the grantee overall. And so one of the most recent events that we had, we partnered with the Peoria County Sheriff's Office to have a meeting regarding swatting. If you're not familiar with swatting, essentially somebody says, hey, there's an active assailant or an active shooter, and then police respond as if there is an active shooter on your grounds. If you're not aware, Canton had, their high school had an incident, ultimately traced back to an overseas phone call. During that phone call, they said that there's a shooter, Canton High School, and they started firing off live rounds on the phone. And that got everybody's attention. And so the Canton superintendent was also able to join us and shared a number of great experiences that they had in particular the breakdown of their response. And so that was beneficial to our superintendents and building level administrators. I think I'll probably end with the GMB is coming up. We want to thank Scott Sorrell. Definitely, as we're trying to figure out, we get a lot of complaints from the local school districts that there's no place for the kids to eat. And so Scott came up with, I think, a bunch of great solutions, and then he sent off some correspondence, and we're obviously hopeful that that's going to eventually get us some vendors downtown and a potentially variants for food trucks. And so we're certainly excited. Technically kicks off on the 11th, but then there's nothing really until the end of the month on the 28th, and then we're out there with a presence almost every day from then on out. And so that's sort of the update from our office.
Are you still looking for sponsors for each of those?
Yeah, so we will always be happy to accept sponsors for any of our days. And that's, I think, an area we've struggled a little bit with this year, given other financial restraints that are going on in the community.
How much is it to sponsor a day? 140? Is that what I remember?
I can't recall off the top of my head, but I can get a number to you.
Okay. Well, if it's $140, which is what I kind of recall.
Okay, yeah.
Then member Coates and I have decided that we're going to sponsor a day.
That's great, thank you.
And then we're going to issue a challenge to the rest of the chairs and vice chair teams to sponsor a day. And any departments or elected officials, we're issuing the challenge. So we're throwing it down and see who will pick it up.
Great, thank you.
All right.
Yeah, there you
We'll
go.
be looking for another co-chair.
Even if it's not the minimum, we'll accept it.
All right. Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
All right, next we have.
can I
Oh,
ask
sorry.
him a
Go ahead.
question?
Yeah, Phil.
The spring celebration, which is one of the best opportunities to see the great things that go on in school, because these people bring their artwork and they of course have music and so forth. And you have great entertainment. I've been involved in several of them with different schools, and I love this spring. Because the spring is a great time of the year. We're leading into summer, of course, and all that. But my one is going to ask. It had. I got a senior moment, guys.
Food court? Food trucks? Was it food trucks, Phil? Food trucks? No? Okay.
Should have just gone ahead and asked my question to you. Oh, I know what it was. Do you have your brochures put out yet for this? Each year, you used to have a brochure that listed all of the schools and those particular people that were coming into this spring celebration and so forth. Because a number of times people will even ask us, who's going to be there? Well, our newspaper, and I don't want to be critical of the newspaper, but they're usually 2 or 3 days late on anything. And I don't know whether they'll ever publish. And I still subscribe to the newspaper. But anyway, George, do you have those brochures printed yet?
So this year we're pushing almost everybody to the website. So before you would go to a separate website in order to get information about the GMB. This year we decided to consolidate it down to our website. And so you'll be able to access all that information going to the Peoria ROE.org website for sure. And I think we decided we weren't going to print, partly because we were having some sponsorship issues, but.
All right. Thank you. And council did confirm for me it's $140.
Okay, great.
So Mr. Corner,
So I'll write you all down.
we're looking for sponsors for days for the GMB. So $140. All right. Next we have. Oh yeah.
I want to take Phil's comment, and actually during lunch today at my employer across the street, had a discussion with several of my coworkers about the GMB, and the statement was made, you need to promote this to local downtown businesses to make sure. A lot of businesses have employees that work remote, some work in an office. If they know it's here and from April 11th through the 28th, I think you'll get more people down. So I would ask you, however you can push it to any local businesses that have people in the downtown, promote that out electronically, get the word out, because that'll help. Again, my whole thing is get momentum, get people to come back downtown to work, to have food carts, have all the other things we need to get downtown perked up again. So whatever you can do to promote, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Thank you. All right. Finally, Becca. Get you up here.
Thank you. For the sake of time, I will move swiftly and just highlight just a couple of things. Electronics collection, the website has been updated. Kusakowski is now providing Saturday hours a number of times throughout the month, throughout the summer, and the $10 television fee has been continued through August, so that's great. One correction is Limestone Township originally reported August 26th and 27th for their collection. It's September 26th and 27th. 159 people attended their Alpha Park Library education sessions on the referendum that they will have on April 4th on the ballot regarding waste and recycling collection. The other two things that I wanted to highlight quickly are Regional Food Council in coordination with Beth, who is on vacation, so we had to move the date. April 14th, in partnership with the Extension and a number of other agencies, the Regional Food Council is hosting some information on farm to school funding. USDA has $7.3 million that's being funneled just into the state of Illinois through ISB. for schools to take advantage of some farm to school stuff. So we have a number of speakers lined up. So that is April 14th, and it's open to anyone. You will find that on the website right after this meeting. It's not on there now. It needs to be on there. And then lastly, the electrical use and natural gas for 2022 is included. You will see that there's a 10% reduction in electrical usage from 21 to 22, and most of that is because of Headington Oaks. Most of the other departments remained pretty consistent. And that's all I have.
Thank you. I did take advantage of the $10 TV disposal. It was super easy, super fast. Any questions? All right. Thank you very much. Any public comment? Any miscellaneous? I apologize for taking all the public safety's time. Sorry. Do you have anything, Scott? No. Okay. All right. We're adjourned. Thank you.